First of all, I just want to welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll go ahead and kick things off now. First of all, my name is Clay. I'm a customer success manager here at Accelo. I've been with Accelo for about a year and a half now. I'm really looking forward to co-hosting today's live training webinar, which we hope contains some important content for everyone that's joined. Today, I'm actually joined by Alec. He's one of our technical account managers here at Accelo. You may be familiar with Alec as he often hosts our live training webinars, but today we'll actually be throwing him the questions, so kind of role reversal here. And if you joined our webinars in the past, you know our live training series is structured a little bit different than standard webinars. All areas that we'll be covering in the live training are use cases that real customers have asked during implementation or expert service sessions. We'll spend a little time later on explaining how expert services work to give you some more context. But first, let's jump into some content. Today, we'll be exploring retainers and recurring work, an absolute critical piece for generating and managing recurring revenue for your business. Some topics that we'll cover today are retainer use cases, periods, allowances, and templates, when to use a retainer instead of a project, linking projects and tickets to retainers, retainer automation, and analyzing and reporting on your recurring work. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to chat them in. We'll do our best to kind of answer those as they come up, and then we actually have a live Q&A session at the very end. But don't worry, if your question goes unanswered during the live Q&A, we'll be sure to follow up via email to make sure you guys get the answers that you need there. So let's jump into our first topic. I have Alec here. So, hey Alec, say I'm not very familiar with retainers module in Accelo or the value it can bring to my business. Would you be able to briefly explain what a retainer is and why we'd want to use them? Sounds like you might be muted there, Alec.
Oh, thank you for the reminder, Clay. Hey everyone, it's nice to meet y'all over the Zoom broadcast here, but I'm definitely happy to provide some input on this here. Simply put, the retainers module in Accelo is an excellent capability that allows you to easily manage and streamline your recurring work across your entire client base. So first, let's talk about why you'd want to use them and why they're so important to service businesses. There are two very important reasons why having recurring work in place in your business is beneficial. The first one is that it produces consistent cash flow that you can rely on month over month or quarter over quarter. With most professional service businesses, project work isn't consistent and we can't fully rely on that work producing a steady income month over month. When running a project-only business model, you can potentially become more prone to cash flow problems because you may not know when your next revenue stream is coming in. So essentially, we should be trying hard not to have all of our eggs in one basket. We really want to try to set up recurring work packages that we can sell to our clients so we can rely on that income coming in the door every month. Recurring revenue is extremely important for combating recurring expenses that all businesses have, such as payroll. Now, the second reason why recurring work is important is because it creates an ongoing partnership and relationship with your clients. So if we think about project work, it might only happen every 6 to 12 months per client. Now, even though these projects can be pretty large in revenue, once again, they aren't consistent and we can't rely on them. And the months in between with no work are putting that relationship you have with your clients at risk. During that off time, they might go back to the market, try to find another vendor, or they could be taken out to lunch or dinner with a competitor of yours. If we have recurring engagements in place with our clients every month, it creates a commercial reason for us to work with them and stay connected to them. And that consistent touch point we have with them month over month essentially keeps them linked to us, and it reduces the chance that they go back to the market to find another vendor. And on top of that, it also gives you consistent opportunities to pitch additional services to them.
Awesome. Thanks for the context. I can definitely see why having recurring work is important. Say, I'm very new to the concept of retainers and how to use them within Accelo. Would you be able to walk us through some of the settings we see on creating a retainer?
Yeah, definitely. So once again, the retainers module is designed to keep track of all the recurring work you have in place across your client base and to keep track of the amount of time you're spending servicing your clients. So let's take a look at the retainer creation page in more detail. That's what we've got on the screen right now. So now we can see at the top, I've just got a retainer that I've created for just a standard monthly SEO package. And the first things I want to talk about here are in the middle of the screen, and they're the retainer period and allowances. So a retainer period at its most basic level is a billing cycle. You want to set the period to match how frequently you bill the client for the services you are providing to them. So for example, since this is a monthly SEO package, I've made my period duration 1 month, but you can also click into this dropdown and select it to be a week, a quarter, or a year instead if you'd like. Now, as for the period allowance, you can think of this as the bucket of time or value that we have to deliver the work in each billing cycle or period. And in this example, my allowance is set to 20 hours. This means that we're trying to complete all the monthly work within this 20 hours of time. You can also select this to be fixed value and include that price as well. That's another option for you, but we'll use hours for this example. So basically, whenever anyone logs time against the retainer, it's going to chew or eat away at the allowance that we've set here. And this, in a nutshell, is how you can easily track how over or under budget you are on your client retainers. And we'll take a quick example. Yeah, we'll just do a quick example of this in action really quick. So I'm just going to navigate to the retainer. And if we look to the bottom here, this is a list of our periods. And we can see that I've already got a couple hours of time logged, 4 out of the 20 hours. But when I go up here and log some time, I'll just go ahead and maybe do another 3 hours for this example. We'll go ahead and save that. Do a quick refresh of the page. And then once this loads up, we'll go right back to the bottom there. And we can see that that's adjusted in real time here. It's now 7 hours instead. Now we'll go back to that retainer creation page. And we're going to take a look at this period billing section right here. We got 2 options here, prepaid or postpaid. So with a prepaid retainer, the client will get billed for the amount that we've set inside this prepaid price section. So in other words, we are billing them based on the budget we've set for the retainer. Now a postpaid retainer is where we bill the client at the end of the billing cycle or period after we've done all of our monthly work. And with this type of retainer, the client will get billed for the total amount of time we've logged during the billing cycle.
Got it. That makes complete sense. I appreciate the background. I see that there's some additional fields and options available on this page. Do you mind highlighting some of these and going through them with me?
Definitely. So one extremely valuable piece of functionality that exists on prepaid retainers is the ability to automatically create invoices for the next period once the current period expires. And in order to do this, we just need to check in this checkbox right here. And what this will do is automatically, like I said, renew or create the next period once that current one expires. And when that occurs, we have the ability to tell Accelo to do certain things from this dropdown right here. So for example, I could tell the system to create an invoice for me. I could even take it a step further and tell it to create an invoice and send an email to my client to really streamline my invoicing process. Additionally, you have the option to roll over any unused period allowances and subtract excess from subsequent periods. So if I got this rollover one checked in, we'll go ahead and use my 20-hour allowance to illustrate this. Let's say that I've only used 15 of my 20 hours. So when the next period happens, it will be for 25 hours instead of the 20 because we're going to roll that over. And then on the flip side, if I got subtracts checked in here, let's say I use 25 hours instead of 20. That means that my next period or billing cycle will only have 15 hours of time. And another really powerful and time-saving feature of the retainer module is the ability to create templated tasks, which we can see over here on the left. These templated tasks are fantastic for managing work that recurs or repeats each billing cycle. And we'll take a quick look at how this works. In this example, I've created 4 tasks that are going to repeat each billing cycle. And what's really nice about this is you can choose when you want the start and due dates to be for each task. And in my example, I've structured these templates so that each task is a week long in duration, and also so they are split out evenly across the month. And we'll take a quick look at how to do this. So in this first task right here, what we're really looking for here is the start and the due dates. That's how we control this. So my start date is when the retainer period actually begins, and then my due date is 7 days after that period commence date. And then my second task here, the start date is going to be the commence date of the period plus 7 days. Due date is going to be 7 days from there. And we'll kind of see a pattern down here, right? The next one is the commence date plus 14, doing 7 days after that. And then finally, the commence date plus 21, and then 7 days after that. So you have control over what you want those days to be to kind of structure it for your use case. But when you're doing this, Accelo is automatically scheduling out those tasks for you every billing cycle, which reduces the admin time that would be needed typically. And what's also nice about these task templates is that you can have different billable rates on each task. And this is particularly helpful for retainers that are a fixed value versus hours. So for example, if I take a look at this first task here, this has got $100 an hour billable rate, whereas my second task here has $200 an hour. So in that scenario of fixed value, if I log 1 hour on task A, then $100 chews away from that allowance. But if I log 1 hour on task B, then $200 gets chewed away at that allowance. And while we're on the topic of templates, you'll notice that we also have material templates on the right-hand side as well. These are the same concept as task templates. So if you add them here, they're going to repeat each billing cycle. And these are helpful to use if you have some tangible items that you sell to your clients every month, such as software licenses or even pieces of equipment. So we'll go ahead and do this really quick. I'll add in a template. And maybe in this example, we'll just select some software licenses. Maybe the quantity will be 5. So we can see here, it's kind of grayed out, but take a look at the bottom right. My period total is now 2,000 because that's the prepaid price, but once I save this, you'll see that this updates. So whatever you're setting in the material template is going to tack on or add on top to the prepaid price of that prepaid retainer.
Awesome. Thanks, Alec. I can see at a glance how the retainer module can help us streamline recurring work, as well as keep track of how much our period allowance we're using. I do have a question though. I'm a little unsure if we should be using retainers to manage our work or if I should be using projects. Would you be able to explain why you'd want to use one versus the other?
Yeah, that's a great question, Clay. So while projects do have their own benefits, such as project plans, dependencies, and adaptive scheduling capabilities, it really comes down to whether the work you're doing with your clients is recurring or ongoing. Now, in this retainer, we have these task templates which repeat every billing cycle. So broadly speaking, any recurring work you have in place with your clients should definitely be managed with a retainer. And if you try to manage that work with a project, you'd probably have a very large project plan, and it would also take a really long time to create all those line items in the project. So once again, with recurring work, we recommend creating task templates and then letting Accelo generate and schedule the tasks for you each billing cycle.
Got it. But what if we don't have predetermined tasks upfront that recur? What if it's more of a thing where I have a list of services I promised to deliver that differ month to month? Or what if I don't know the work until the client actually reaches out to me?
Yes, that is a good question and a very valid point. So in that type of scenario, the work itself is more ongoing and not recurring. This can still be managed through a retainer. So if the work you're providing to your client has some kind of allowance you're looking to keep track of, as well as a defined billing cycle, you can use the retainer to manage and streamline the invoicing piece, as well as track the amount of time and value you're using against the allowance. But in these types of scenarios, the actual work itself might be better managed through a project or a ticket, and then linked to the retainer. And when that occurs, all time you log against the project or ticket would chew away at the allowance on the retainer. And this is another extremely powerful feature of the retainers module. Essentially, a retainer is considered a bucket of value, and other pieces of the product can consume that bucket of value. So we'll go ahead and take a look as to how you can set this up. So the first step would be to actually create the retainer in Accelo. And as we can see here, I've got this one created, so I'm good to go. And once you've done that, you can add new projects and tickets to this retainer to link them, or you can add existing projects and tickets to the retainer. So to add a brand new project or ticket to the retainer, all we got to do is navigate to this create button right here, and then we can select new ticket or new projects. In this example, I'll select new ticket. And we'll go ahead and just give this a quick title, maybe just test. And then notice right here, there's a retainer dropdown, and it's already defaulted to the retainer that we started from. So that's where we're making that link. I'll just go ahead and select a quick type, and then we'll save this into the system. And then once the ticket is created, you can see at the bottom left right here, there's a retainer section, and it'll provide that link back for you. Now, with that being said, if you ever want to add existing projects and tickets to a retainer, the process would be to navigate to that ticket or project you wish to link, go ahead and edit the ticket from here, and then once you do that, that retainer dropdown that we saw is going to default to none, but all you got to do is just hit that dropdown and then pick the retainer, save the ticket, and then it gets linked right there, which is really nice. But here's really where the magic happens, right? So if we take a look here, basically, right, we're going to log time on this ticket, and it's going to chew away at the retainer. So what I'll do here is just log another maybe 3 hours on this ticket and save that time log. And now if we go back to the retainer from here, we're going to see how that usage meter adjusts in real time. So now we're at 10 hours compared to that 7 hours before. And another thing that you can do to get a little bit more granularity is you can click into this retainer period itself. And when you click into the retainer period, it breaks down all of the time for you really, really nice. So we can see here in this usage section, I can see where time was logged against projects, logged against tickets that are linked, tasks against the retainer directly, or just any time that's logged against the retainer period directly. And also, when you're on the retainer page itself, you can see that we've got a projects and tickets tab. So this is where you can go just to get a sense of what linked items that you have. Now, if you ever need to unlink a project or ticket from the retainer, what you would need to do is go to the item that we wish to unlink. In this case, we'll go to that ticket. And then I'm sure you guys are probably already aware of what to do here, but I will just describe it. You go ahead and edit the ticket. We're going to switch that retainer dropdown back to none, which removes that link from the retainer. One other thing that you'll have to do though, especially if you want to actually unlink the time that was logged against the period, is you'll have to go back to that period to do so. So once again, I'm back at the retainer. I'm just going to go to my overview, click into the period, and then once we're in there, we're going to look at that same usage section where we're breaking down the time. So I'll go ahead and go to this ticket. As we can see, we've got 3 hours that is basically chewed away at this allowance here. We'll go ahead and unlink that ticket, which then releases the time back on the ticket directly and removes it from that allowance that was previously chewed up. And one more thing that's important to talk about here, when you're linking projects and tickets to retainers, there's another important checkbox on the retainer creation page to take into consideration, and we'll quickly take a look at it here. And that checkbox is right here, right underneath the rates. So if you want all the time you log against your linked projects and tickets to reflect the actual rate you've set on that retainer, you're going to want to select this box. But on the flip side, if you want your linked projects and tickets to have varying billable rates, then you'll want to keep this unchecked, because then you can apply those varying billable rates on tasks on the project or even tasks on the ticket as well.
Awesome. I'm really liking this. I've heard that Accelo has some very powerful automations that can help me streamline our process even further and even notify us of important conditions when they arise, such as when too much of our allowance is being used. Would you be able to show us some common examples of these automations and how to set them up within Accelo?
Yes, I'd be more than happy to. So utilizing automation will really help you to fully reap the benefits of the retainers module. So what we'll do here is pose a few common scenarios that we get asked during sessions with clients, and then describe some best practices for managing this in Accelo. But first, just as a quick review, towards the beginning of the session, we discussed how you can automate invoicing on prepaid retainers with this checkbox, and that's one of the quickest and easiest ways you can start to implement some automation. If you go ahead and do this though, just make sure to take the time to set up your invoice templates so that your invoices look and feel exactly the way that you'd like to. Because when we automatically invoice, and you got it set to do so, we're going to pick up what invoice template is set right there. So that's important to keep in mind. But with the coming examples, we're going to utilize triggers in our configuration to implement them.
Sounds good. So for the first scenario, let's say we have a monthly retainer in place with our clients. For some of our clients, we have tasks and pieces of work that don't recur every month, but instead only happen every quarter. Since using task templates will repeat work every billing cycle, how can we set up Accelo to automatically create quarterly tasks against a monthly retainer?
That is a great question. So luckily we can accommodate this by using triggers. We'll go ahead and put this into practice. But first what we got to do is navigate to our settings on the bottom left, which opens up our configuration. And then from there, we're going to access retainers from the left-hand side. And triggers are put into effect in types, progressions, and fields. That loads up the different workflows that you might have in there. And then triggers tab is found right here. One thing to note about this though is that these automations by default, these triggers, will fire on all retainers and the type that we're implementing this on. So if you do not want quarterly tasks to get created on all of your retainers of that type, then we recommend creating a custom profile field, which will allow you to tell Accelo whether quarterly tasks should be getting created on select retainers. So we'll go ahead and put this into effect really quick just in case anyone watching would need this. But to do so, we're going to access custom profile fields on the left, and we'll go ahead and add a field in here. So once again, we just need to tell Accelo, hey, which retainers do we actually want quarterly tasks to get created on? So I'll just name this title, quarterly tasks needed with a question mark. I'll make the type a select field, and it's just yes or no. So basically, in the coming example with the trigger, we're going to use this as a rule so that the trigger will only fire on retainers that are marked as yes. We can make it visible on create. We can even make it required so that people have to check it in so they don't forget. And then we'll go ahead and save that one into the system. Now that we've got the custom profile field set up, we can go back to types, progressions, and fields and create the trigger. So we'll select prepaid from the left. Triggers is right here. And you would hit new trigger in this example, but I've already got a couple created that we'll just take a look at. Okay, so first things first, give the trigger a title. What do you want it to be called? Good thing to know about triggers is you can also choose what days of the week you want them to fire on. And in this example, I don't want it to fire on Saturdays and Sundays, so we give you that flexibility. And then there's a trigger repetition section here. By default, it's going to be set to only run once for each retainer, but we need this to fire more than once for each retainer. So once we check in this little circle right here, the trigger fire delay pops up to the right. And this is a way for us to tell Accelo how frequently we want this trigger to fire. Sorry about my dog. And in this example, since these are quarterly tasks, we want this to fire every 90 days. But you can apply this same logic for biannual tasks as well by just removing that 90 and putting 180 into that section. So the next thing that we need to do is create some rules. And basically with rules, the trigger is only going to fire if all of the rules we define have been met. So best practices for when you're making any types of triggers, you always want to have some kind of status rule because we only want it firing on our active pieces of work and the things that we care about, right? So in this example, the category, I selected a retainer field. The field itself is the retainer status, and I only want it firing when it's active. The second one that we need in this example is another rule on the retainer field, but this one we're going to set on the commenced or beginning date of the retainer itself. And we're telling Accelo that we only want this trigger to fire if that commence date happened more than 90 days ago. So what that will do is, right, when the retainer gets created, we're going to wait 90 days before this trigger fires. And then looking back here, after that, we'll keep staggering it out 90 days and we'll kind of have that quarterly cycle in place. And then also, if you're using that custom profile field, you'd want to add another rule in here on the retainer field. You want to pick that custom field here, and we only want this firing if that field is marked as yes. Now that we've got that into the system, sorry about that, I shouldn't have done that. We'll go ahead to the actions. So the action is basically, hey, what do we want Accelo to do when these rules have been met? And in this example, we'd select add new action and create that task. I've already got one created, so we'll just take a quick look at it. I'm sure you're probably pretty familiar with this interface, but you go ahead and enter in any descriptions or titles, and you can also use merge fields on the right to pre-populate client-specific information, or in this case, retainer-specific information. All you got to do is click to copy, and then you paste it on the left. The task time, how long do we expect this task to take? And then also we want to take into consideration these start and due dates, since these will be automated. We want to kind of structure these out the way that we want to, and that will directly feed into user schedules, so that's pretty important. And then we can pick ourselves a rate as well as the assignee. We'll go ahead and hit save. And that's all we got to do for that one. Once you got everything saved into the system, the last step is to just flick it on right here, and you're good to go.
Perfect. This is really cool to see. Here's another scenario for you though. How can we set up Accelo so the system automatically closes out expired periods? It seems really troublesome to go back and have to close out those old periods manually.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is a very useful automation to put into effect when you've set up Accelo to automatically renew your periods on the retainers themselves. It's also very helpful if you have your retainer set up to roll over unused hours or subtract excess hours, as this only takes effect when a period is closed. So what we're going to do once again is use a trigger to put this automation into effect. And I've already got one right here. So we'll pick that one up. Once again, go ahead and give it the title. In this scenario, I need it to fire more than once for each retainer. And in the scenario of them being monthly retainers, I'm setting my trigger fire delay to 29 days, directly the day before the month. That's pretty much controlling how often it's going to fire. Now we're going to take a look at the rules here. Once again, we're going to put that status rule in there. We only want it firing on active pieces of work. The new rule that we got to put into effect here is, well, actually, this isn't a required rule, but we definitely recommend it. So the second one that we see here, if you just click that drop down, there's a period field. So this is a rule that's going to go off of the retainer period itself. And in this example, I set it to be off of the commence date of the period. And with this kind of setup, this trigger is only going to fire when the current period's commence date happened more than 5 days ago. And this can be a helpful automation to implement just in case your staff forgets to log time at the end of the month, right? We know not everyone's perfect. I know myself, I forget to do things sometimes, and I got to go back and do things from the previous week. So with this rule, we give them a full work week to log any time on the previous period before this automation closes it out. Because when a period is closed, we can't log time on it anymore. So that could be helpful to put into effect if you're worried about that happening. And I've also put another rule in here off of the period because I only want this automation firing if the current period status is actually opened. And then lastly, the action that we need to put into effect here. All you got to do is click this add new action. And once you're in that dropdown, you're going to see this option pop up, close oldest expired period. Go ahead and hit save and close there, flick that on, and that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Alec. Let's do one more example. How can we set up Accelo to notify us when we're coming at risk of using up our period allowance? I really hate to go over our allowance, so it'd really be great if we were notified once that allowance is about to be at risk.
Definitely. So once again, this can be accomplished by creating a trigger. And this scenario in particular can be managed particularly well in Accelo because you get to dictate what at risk actually means. So let's go ahead and take a look here. And I've got this one right here. Yep, we'll go ahead and give it the title like normal. And let's go to the rules section first here. Once again, I've just got my status rule. I'm only going to fire it on active retainers. But the unique rule that we're going to put into effect here is on the period. And now we want to select that usage percentage and is greater than or equal to, or you have some other options in here depending on what your preference is. But in my example, this trigger is only going to fire if we've used 85% or more of the retainer allowance. And that you could change that to be 70, 75, however frequently you really want to get notified, right? And really quick before we go to the action, if we take a look at the first section here, this has to fire more than once for each retainer, but we need to take into effect the trigger fire delay. Because let's say that we hit 85% of our allowance towards the very end of the month, but then next period or billing cycle, we start rapidly chewing up that allowance. If we set this trigger fire delay to be 29 days like before, and that scenario happened, you're not going to receive that notification in time. So with that being said, this is up to your discretion as to when you'd like it to, how frequently you'd like it to fire. I've kind of just split the middle and put 14 days here, where that's just something to keep in mind. And then the action here, you can choose what you want to do here, but most commonly what we'd see is some kind of activity or email notification that goes out to the retainer manager or whoever you want to get notified about it. I'm sure you're probably familiar with kind of email activities, but we'll go ahead and you basically just pick a sender who's sending the email, who the recipient is, maybe in this case, the manager or the retainer. Action title is what it just looks like on the back end. The subject is the subject of the email. And then right here is the body. You can include any merge fields that you need to from the right and kind of sculpt this to your liking. And then once you're done, you just hit save. And then once again, the last thing that you need to do here is just flick this thing on and you're good to go.
That's awesome. Those are some pretty powerful capabilities. It was really beneficial to learn about them today. All of what I've seen here has been really helpful, but I do have one question. With all these retainers in the system, with varying allowances and billing cycles, how can we keep track of all this? What reporting tools can we use to analyze the data and gain additional insights?
Yes, that is a really good question. So luckily, there are a variety of tools you can use to provide you with the insight you're looking for. First, let's take a look at how you can see this information on an individual retainer basis. So I'm just going to navigate to another retainer in the system. This one's got some more periods in there with some usage kind of varying a little all over the place. So we'll get a little bit more data out of this reporting tool. But once again, for individual retainers, we have this nice Insights tab built into the retainer page itself. And we'll take a look at this right here. So at the top, we've got the financial summary to date. So this aggregates data from all of the retainer periods and just summarizes it and displays it for you right here. And what we're seeing here is the expected revenue, the cost to the business, profits, and also the amount we've invoiced. And it's also going to show you we'll break it down for you by services, materials, and expenses, and then total everything up on the right here for you. There's also a pretty nice meter right here, overall usage versus allowance, because you can see overall during the life cycle of the retainer how over or under allowance you are. And in this case, we're averaging about 86%, which is pretty good. And then at the bottom, there's a nice period profitability comparison graph. So what this does here is the blue line here is what we see as the cost of the business. The green line is the expected revenue. But that green line can also be toggled to show invoice revenue instead. And this could be helpful if you're not billing for any excess on the retainer. You're just flat invoicing them a set amount every month. You might want to look at your profitability by the invoice revenue instead, but we give you both options there. And then at the top, you can see here, these are the periods right there. It's kind of separated with these lines. It's going to show you the amount of profit on each billing cycle and also the percentage as well. So while this is a solid tool for reporting on individual retainers, there are other ways to obtain this information on a more global level for all the retainers in your business. So what we'll do now is take a look at the retainer budget usage report. And this one right here is actually part of our new reporting module. But the really good thing about this one is that it's free to everyone. We're not going to charge you to do it. You get 10 free reports as part of this new reporting module. This is one of them, so you can really get some value out of it without purchasing any licenses. And if you ever need to access these reports, you just go over here to the reports and then select retainer management from here. And then these reports that we're discussing are going to be listed inside of there. So this is the retainer budget usage report. We'll take a quick look at the filter options at the top. The most important one is these date filters right here. We need to tell Accelo over what period of time do we want to report off of. And this looks at the commence date of the retainer period on and after here and on and before. So that's how you get to really quick just choose that time frame you're reporting on. And then at the top, we have some visuals that display the information in a more summary view. And then at the bottom, we have a spreadsheet that gives you all the details. But just as a quick overview, at the top, we're going to show you information like the amount of periods that are there, current profit, current budget usage, current hourly budget usage, and some forecasts over here. And then in the retainer spreadsheet, we'll go ahead and drag this over so we can kind of see here. Pretty much anything you'd want to know about is visible in this spreadsheet, such as your price budgets, your hourly budgets, how much we've used out of each one of those budgets, how much we've invoiced, and then also forecast amounts. And at the very bottom of the spreadsheet here, we're going to total up each data point so you can get a sense of how it looks across the board. Now, the last report I want to show you guys today is called the Retainer Revenue Forecast Report. Now, this report in particular does require purchasing a reporting license to access, but it's an extremely valuable tool because it allows you to quickly and easily predict how much revenue you'll have coming in the door each month. Just like before, you're going to set those date filters at the top to include the time range of your choosing. And then once you apply that, the graph here will reflect these date ranges you've selected. So in this graph in the middle, it's pretty easy to understand, but we're just totaling it up by month. You can hover over any month to get the exact amount of that revenue that's expected to come in. And in these graphs, you can even click into them and choose to drill down by week or maybe drill up to quarter so you can get a sense of, how your business is looking like over multiple months instead. And then once again at the bottom here, we're going to aggregate all retainers that fit this criteria that we've set at the top. And it's a pretty simple interface here to understand. We're just showing you each retainer here, and then each month is listed. And we're going to total up each month at the bottom. And then the grand total is at the very bottom right. That is the total amount of expected revenue that you've got, you can expect on coming through the door. And also really quickly, while we're on the topic of the reports, any visual or spreadsheet here can be exported to CSV. All you got to do is click anywhere in that box, select this little 3 dots icon, and then export to CSV.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all the information today, Alec. Really appreciate it. Now, what you've seen today is an example of how an expert service session might run. Expert services are an open format and collaborative discussion that are specific to the topics that you need support with. They're truly customized to help solve business problems or to optimize workflows that are unique to your business. Some examples of what could be covered include assistance when you need to tackle challenges and obtain quick resolutions, detailed account audits to improve and optimize your configuration, advanced end user training focused on the topics that are most important to your team, and many more. If you're interested in finding out more about our expert services, you can send an email to success@accelo.com. And an account manager such as myself will arrange a 30-minute no obligation scoping call to understand your challenges and propose recommendations and sessions to resolve them. You can also find out a bit more about our expert services on our Success Service webpage. We'll go ahead and chat out a link so you can check it out. And then next, I did want to touch on our new Accelo community forum. We just released our community forum, which is full of great resources. It actually ties together a support forum, a developer forum, and has a knowledge base built in all in one. So you have everything you need in just one spot. We'll also go ahead and send out a link via chat just so you have access to it. So I highly recommend go and check it out and be a part of the community. All right. So moving on, we're now going to jump into a live Q&A session with Alec here. Just give me one moment. I'm going to go through some of the questions that were chatted in here, and then we'll just have Alec address them live here. All right, Alec, you ready for some Q&A?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. So the first question that we have here is, when choosing create invoice when period is created, it creates separate invoices for each retainer. It does not consolidate all retainers for the period in one invoice. Is there a way to automatically consolidate it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? So in that scenario, we've got multiple retainers for the clients. So when you're automating invoicing, like we are right here, with the automating of invoicing, there isn't a way to consolidate those together. But what you could do is use the company billing tool. And just for reference, that's going to be located here. You click billing and you can click company invoice. That section will allow you to invoice for basically all work inside the system, but you can narrow it down to just select your retainers. And then if the client has multiple retainers that fit the filters options that you've selected, you'll have the ability to include them all on that one invoice.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Looks like question number 2 is there any option for a percent of unused hours to roll over, i.e., I have contracts where only 50% of the hours roll over?
That is a good question. That would be pretty nice, but at this time, there's no option here to apply any type of percentage. It's either you're going to turn it on and it's going to roll over everything, or you're turn it off and it's not going to roll over anything. But that's a really good question, though.
Yeah, definitely all or nothing, it sounds like. All right, looks like the next question that we have here is what will the basis for the commencement date be on?
The basis for the commencement date. So
What the
that,
commencement date actually represents.
what does that represent? Yep, okay, gotcha. So the commence date here means when the retainer actually starts, right? So when you're creating the retainer from scratch, this will be blank. If you don't enter anything in that commence date and you just hit create retainer at the bottom right, it's going to default to being today. But if you wanted to put it in ahead of time, you could always just click the calendar link and set it like to the first of the month or whatever it might be, and then that date will populate there. But to answer your question, the commence date is when the retainer began.
Awesome. And then that would set off the future periods as well off that kind of same date, essentially.
Yes, correct.
Awesome. Cool. Looks like we have another question in here. The question is, can you adjust a template material in the actual period?
That is a good question. So it is going to depend whether it's been billed or not. But if the template hasn't been billed, you can go in there and adjust it on the retainer period itself. But once we invoice for things, and you might be familiar with this, some things in the system get locked down, like your time entries and stuff like that. With retainers, you're not going to be able to adjust like the prepaid price and the allowance and stuff once it's been invoiced. But to answer your question, you definitely can go to the retainer period directly and adjust it as needed.
Got it. Awesome. All right, give me one more moment. Let me try to pull up some other questions here. Just digging them up. All right, I think I got a good question here for you, Alec. If you choose to not autocomplete tasks when a period closes, would the budget roll over to the following periods?
Okay, so if you choose to not autocomplete tasks, will those budgets roll over? I think I actually am not 100% sure. We can follow up with you afterwards on that one. I don't want to just give you any incorrect information. I'm not, yeah, like I said, I'm not entirely sure. My gut feel is that it won't, but once again, we'll follow up with you after that one. I don't want to lead you in the wrong direction here.
Definitely. Awesome. And don't worry, if we don't get to your questions on here, we'll definitely follow up via email. Make sure that you guys get the answers you need. So it's all right. If we don't get your answer, we'll definitely be following up with you. But give me one moment. Let me find some other questions I have here. All right. I have one more question here, Alec. It says, I now understand how you can link projects and tickets to retainers, but I'm a little confused whether I should be putting tasks against my linked tickets or the retainer itself. Would you be able to provide some insight?
Yeah, so in that scenario, you've got a linked ticket to the retainer. We're trying to figure out where to put the work. Basically, when you put a task on a ticket, that task can span across multiple billing periods, whereas tasks on retainers, when you're using templated tasks here, those are limited to a single billing period. So for example, if there's a specific report you have to generate each month for a client, then that should be placed on the retainer directly so that it recurs. But on the flip side, let's say a client is having some problems with their website and they need to make some changes to it or whatever it might be, right? This could span over some time and the task in that scenario doesn't recur. So in this scenario, it would make more sense to place the task against the ticket. Then you can log time against the task when doing the work, and the time will get allocated to the retainer period that is relevant, the one that is currently existing.
Awesome. Perfect. Appreciate that insight. All right, I found another question here for you, Alec. Is it possible to set up two retainers for a single company? We often do recurring work for multiple departments that need to be tracked and invoiced separately.
Yeah, so you could definitely have more than one retainer per company. There's not any repercussions that I could think of doing that. I guess if you just wanted the invoicing to be all on one invoice, then you could use the company billing tool. But yeah, there's no limitation to how many retainers you can have for a client.
Awesome. Perfect. One moment, let me pull up a few more questions here we'll go through. All right, here's one. Question is, I see that we can define an allowance on a retainer period to keep track of the work we do, but is there a way to limit work based on the allowance? In other words, once we hit our allowance, is there a way to stop excess time from getting logged against it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, in a nutshell, Accelo will never stop you from doing work. We should be keeping track of all the work the client needs us to do, and that allows us to either bill for excess fees or allows you to basically use allowance from a future period. And even if you're not rolling over time and stuff like that, at the very least, the time that you're logging gives you insight into the actual retainer's usage. So, if you're constantly going over that allowance each period, then you can try to get the client to go for an even higher package or something like that the next time that contract negotiation comes around.
Awesome. Perfect. And I found another good question here. This one comes up pretty often. We have a prepaid retainer in place with our clients, but we don't invoice for them in the beginning of the billing cycle like most people do. We do our invoicing at the end of each month instead. Can we still automatically invoice our clients that fit this mold?
That is a really good question. So, with automated invoicing, when you have it activated here, the raise date of the invoice itself is always going to default to the first day of the next period, aka the beginning of the month. So if you have prepaid retainers where you're billing on that budget but you bill at the end of the month, then we would recommend using company billing. And then that way you can scoop up all the unbilled time from your prepaid retainers and then invoice for them all at once.
Perfect. Awesome. But I think two more questions here we'll try to get through. Looks like the question is, can I create an ad hoc task on retainers that do not repeat every billing cycle?
Yeah, you definitely can do that. So in this scenario, right, something comes in the door, it's ad hoc. We don't want it recurring every month. So with that being said, we wouldn't want to do it on a task template. What we'd want to do is just put that task directly against the period or billing cycle that it applies to, and then that will ensure that it's only going to apply to that period and that it's not going to recur. So with that being said, you would just access the period directly from the retainer. And then there's a little task section in the middle here, and you can just click into that and then add your task.
Perfect. Awesome. All right, last question we have for you, Alec. This one comes up quite a bit, and I see it quite a bit as well. Why aren't the changes I made on the edit retainer screen being reflected on the retainer itself?
Yes, that is a really good question. So let's just paint this scenario, right? Let's say that we've got retainer periods that are already in the system, right? And then we're editing the retainer from the edit retainer screen, and the changes aren't reflecting. And the reason behind that is because when you edit the retainer directly, like the retainer from the retainer creation screen, the changes that you make will only take effect when that next period is created. It won't adjust, it's not going to retroactively adjust periods already in the system. So if you have periods that already exist, you're going to want to access the period like we've done here, and then you can edit that period directly to make the changes. But you also might want to edit on the retainer itself if you want the changes to reflect to the future billing periods.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Alec. So this brings us to the end of our live training webinar. I hope this was helpful for you all. If we didn't get to your questions, don't worry, we'll send a follow-up email. Make sure that you get that covered. I'd just like to say thank you for everyone joining today. We'll be sure to send the recording out shortly, along with a feedback survey. Within the survey, you can include topic areas that you'd like to see covered in future webinars. We have a number of topics already planned for future sessions, but we'd really like to hear from you to better understand the challenges you're facing, and then we can address those in those webinars moving forward. But that's all I have today. Really appreciate you joining. Take it easy, and bye for now.